Hello, I'm Michael Cantrell, and you are listening to the Prison Officer Podcast, a place to have a conversation about the forgotten cops that work in this country's jails, prisons, and correctional centers. A place for me to try to make sense of a career spent working inside the fence with some of the greatest people that nobody sees or recognizes for the important job they do to keep this world safe. If you love this podcast, hit the follow button, or better yet, share with your family, friends, or coworkers. In more than 28 years of corrections, I have used or supervised Pepperball hundreds of times. Now, as a master instructor for Pepperball, I teach others about the versatility and effectiveness of the Pepperball system. From cell extractions to disturbances on the rec yard, Pepperball is the first option in my correctional toolbox. With the ability to transition quickly from area saturation to direct impact with the non-lethal PAVA projectiles, Pepperball provides me with a range of non-lethal options for cell extractions involving non-compliant inmates, and when the use of force is over, decontamination is easy, with no oily residue on the walls or floors. To learn more about Pepperball, go to www.pepperball.com or click the show notes below. Pepperball is the safer option first. Well, welcome back to the Prison Officer Podcast. Today, I'm really excited to have a new guest, Adam Dennis. He's a 28-year veteran of law enforcement, served 22 years with California's state hostage rescue teams. His SWAT HRT assignments included assault leader, tactical element leader, and team commander. He served for 10 years in the Emergency Operations Unit as the lieutenant responsible for the training and certification of over 400 hostage rescue teams. Those members were spread across 19 teams throughout the state of California. In addition, he spent 10 years with the DOJ Trident Narcotics Task Force and was responsible for certifying team members as instructors in tactical firearms certifications, entry operations, and high-risk warrants and hostage rescue operations. Holds certifications in OC, LSDDs, chemical agents, less lethal munitions. He's very well-rounded in the training, I am sure, so I'm excited to talk to him today. Before we get there, I want to give a shout-out to Liam McGee, he's one of our listeners, and he reached out to me and said, I had this guy in class. You got to get him on the podcast. I want to hear his stories. So Liam's the one that kind of brought us together here. So how are you doing today, Adam?
I'm doing great.
Sounds like
fantastic.
Sounds like an exciting career there.
Yeah, I was fortunate. I was always around good people.
Absolutely. Well, if you've listened to the podcast, I always like to start at the beginning. So kind of walk me through where you grew up at and, how that was with high school and sports and that type of stuff.
Okay. I grew up in a little town up in the Sierra Nevada mountains called Sonora, California. Okay. I'd say in the mountains. It was a foothill community. We're probably about 80 miles, a little bit south and a little bit west of Lake Tahoe.
Okay,
so a little community. Nice. Yeah. My mom and dad, very strong Christians. So we went to a Christian elementary school and a Christian high school, small high school. So I have an identical twin brother, and we basically played soccer, basketball, and baseball because they needed people.
Right. And with an identical twin, you probably played pranks on people.
Only when we were younger. It only happened once, and Dad found out, and that was the end of that.
Oh, that was the end of that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So where'd you go after high school?
I went to a Christian college down in the San Fernando Valley, just outside of Magic Mountain, a town called Newhall, California. The college is called Masters College. So
okay.
Didn't quite get the degree. I went down more than anything to play a little college baseball, non-scholarship college baseball. So
okay.
I was down there for, I think, 2.5 years. Yeah.
What was your major besides baseball?
Criminology. Criminology was my major, yeah.
So you were going to go into criminology.
No, I to be perfectly honest with you, my dad worked for the California Department of Transportation for many, many, many years. Retired as a supervisor, I think, after 33 years. But once we were getting done with college, he just kind of encouraged us to look for a state job for the retirement. That was his big thing. So we would have a good retirement.
Okay.
The Department of Transportation was not really hiring. And I don't want to go down. They were hiring, but anyway. but corrections was starting to boom.
Yeah.
And had a friend, an acquaintance, and plus our older brother had just got into corrections.
Okay.
He loved it. He said it's a great job.
What year is
So
this?
this would have been, I went through the Corrections Academy in 1991.
Okay. Well, we entered
Yeah.
corrections. I came in the first of 1992. So,
Okay.
yeah, we've been doing this almost as long. So your brother
Yes.
went into it, and he came back with good reports.
Uh-huh. And
Had you ever?
my twin brother actually got hired about 6 months before me.
Okay. Had
Hmm.
you ever thought about corrections before that? Did you know what prison and
No,
jail was?
didn't have any idea what it was. Didn't realize the culture shock that I was going to be exposed to, as you well know. Yeah, didn't know any of that. Didn't know nothing
Right.
about it. I just at the time the starting payout there was really good,
Mm-hmm.
and to this day it's really good. Um, and just really didn't have a plan. I knew that I was going to try it. Um, I told myself if I don't like it, then maybe I'll do something else. But I
Right.
enjoyed it from the very first day.
So, going to a Christian school, do you think you were I don't know, a little bit at a disadvantage as
Oh
far
yeah,
as you
absolutely.
probably didn't have any gangs in your school. You probably didn't have much criminality running around.
And that's exactly right.
Okay.
Exactly right. And we grew up in the town we grew up in was 150 people, so
Oh, wow.
um, no gangs or anything up there either.
Yeah. So you're learning on the run when you walk through the door.
Yes, yes.
So tell me about that first time the door slams and tell me about that first year.
I have a really funny story about my first day.
Mm-hmm.
I had an inmate walk up to me. He was from the Rolling 90s Crips in Los Angeles, California. And at the time when I started, the inmates were still allowed to have weight piles and whatnot. So
Right.
I'm sure you can attest with this. It's amazing how big they got, lifting their weights.
Yeah.
And
People don't realize.
he was probably 6'2", and uh, as far as his upper body went, there wasn't a bodybuilder around that had anything on him. I mean,
Yeah.
he was a giant man. And he looked at my name tag and he said, Dennis. I said, yes, sir. He said, new guy. I said, yes, sir. And he said, what would you do if I decide I'm going to put my hands on you right now? I said, I'm going to hold on for dear life. And when my partners get here, you're going to regret that decision. And he looked me in the eyes and he said, you're going to get along just fine.
Yep. Good answer.
It's just a little test first day.
Sure. Yeah.
See where I stood. Yeah.
I remember kind of the similar thing. And I know that the other officers were back watching us, new group, but
Hmm.
they walked up and they got in this one guy's face, and they were saying things to him, and he got all worked up, and he's emotional. And of course, they just
Hmm.
blew him up. That one
Oh,
officer,
yeah.
they just blew him up. And he walks over to me, and goes, "What's your name?" I said, "Cantrell." And that's all I said. The other guy's like, "You don't need to know my name." And that was it. He moved on to the next person.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, that's a lesson. You don't have to show off, or you don't have to
Nope.
show how bad you are,
Nope.
which is
Not at
a
all.
thing that rookies often do. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So, the first year was just, as you well know, a big learning curve.
Hmm.
The California DOC prisons generally, a normal sized prison will have 3 facilities and 1,100 beds on those facilities. So um, I think people that have never been inside the prison system don't realize how outnumbered you really are.
Oh,
Um, we were fortunate. Most, not all, some of the older prisons don't, but most of the modern prisons in California,
right.
not too many places where you don't have a tower or gun coverage above you, inside, outside. So that's always an advantage. But, it was a big learning curve. I met a lot of good people that first year.
Yeah.
Um, and then I met a couple of correctional officers, and that's how that referred to. There was a group that referred to them as prison guards. They didn't want to be
Hmm.
called correctional officers, and we were sworn peace officers in the state. I just thought it was kind of in my heart, it was kind of a derogatory term. I know some people like to be called prison guards, but I just thought it kind of took away from the profession that we were involved in.
Sure.
And I had plenty of them at shift change would just throw their keys down on the table and just say good luck, not give me any advice. Hey,
Yeah.
what's going on in the pod? What's going on in the unit? Anything I need to know? Here's your keys. See you tomorrow, youngster. And
It's a
I
horrible.
told myself if I ever get to the point where I'm a senior person, I was going to help out everybody
Yeah.
that asked me anything as
Right.
best as I could. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's how I was raised.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know. I think you mentioned it, the camaraderie that I felt immediately. Of course you do, because there's nothing like the first time that you end up on the bottom of a pile or fighting an inmate and 20 people show up to help you.
Oh, yeah.
Most people have never experienced that before in
Right.
their life. I got in a fight in like 6th grade, got beat up by an 8th grader, and all my friends ran, the other way. And then you come inside and it's like this, it's camaraderie. They care for you.
Yeah.
They care about you. Maybe not personally, maybe not the person you are deep inside, but they do care as another officer. And that's something
yeah.
that takes a little bit to get used to.
And I think that's a great point. We had, thank God, by the time I got in, we were getting a lot more sophisticated. We had personal alarm devices that would,
Yeah.
have a blue light flashing and a siren on whatever building we might be in. And
Sure.
It was just good to know that when you hit that, you knew people were coming. Without
Yeah.
a doubt, there was people coming. And so if I was like, say, a search and escort officer or a yard officer, when a blue light went off in a building, no one was going to keep me from getting there because I knew people needed assistance. So
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. You do get a closeness in a brotherhood because you're outnumbered, right? I mean, vastly outnumbered.
Yeah. There's nobody else to help you. It's just
No.
the people inside.
Yep.
Yeah. So at some point, you discovered the teams, I guess.
Yes.
So tell me about that.
Okay, a little background about the teams. I'm sure a lot of your listeners and yourself remember the 1980 New Mexico riot,
Mm-hmm.
where they lost basically the entire prison, and
Yep.
it ended up a bunch of National Guards and State Patrol, and finally rushed the prison, and it was a really bad situation, and a lot of people lost their lives. So the governor at the time, I want to say McCarthy, but don't quote me on that,
Mm-hmm.
asked the director of corrections, if this happens to one of my prisons, do we have people that can handle it? And he said no. And he said,
Right.
okay, you got 6 months. I want a plan. I want teams stationed at every prison that will have the capability, whether it's a hostage rescue, a giant incident where the regular staff on duty can't handle. I want
Mm-hmm.
people that are professionally trained to handle that. So that's kind of how it started.
Sure.
That was around 1983. So by the time I tried out for the team in 1996. My twin brother was already a team member, and he was the one that kind of told me, "Hey, you got to do this. You have the right personality for it." And at first, I wasn't too sure about it, but he kept on me, and he said, "You're going to love it." He said, "You said you think it's a brotherhood out there. Wait till you get on this team."
Yeah.
And so, I went to tryouts, and it's a long, hard day. There's no hazing involved, but they do test your commitment. There's a lot of commitment tests during that day. Are you going to quit? Are you going to keep going? No matter how tired you are. And a lot of other good tests. Can you stay calm? Can you keep a clear mind? Can you make proper decisions that need to be made? So I was fortunate to pass tryouts. Took a shower, got our Class A's on, and then we had to have an interview with the commander, assistant commander, and the senior instructors on the team. And I was fortunate, very fortunate, looking back, that they saw something in me that they thought would make a good team member. And it really changed the whole trajectory of my career that day.
Sure.
In California, even though we're prison based, before the last 10 years when I went out to oversee the teams and whatnot, we got called out of the prison all the time. A lot more now than back then.
Sure.
Because now they're really helping local law enforcement almost on a daily basis. One of the 19 teams is probably out doing something, a warrant or assisting with gang sweeps in Fresno on a Friday, Saturday night. So,
yeah. Well, you guys are you're actual peace officers when you graduate from the academy.
Yes, sir.
So that makes a big difference for those agencies that have that. Some places they don't have that
Right.
as a correctional officer, so
Yeah.
they're not spending much time outside.
I found out it just differs from state to state. You never know. Like
Yeah,
Ohio is very much so based along the lines that we were out in California. So it's just on a state by state basis. And we were fortunate enough to be peace officers. And
sure.
if we got a mutual aid request, our color of authority immediately transferred to the PD or the sheriff's department that asked us to come with them. So
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, when rookies ask me, they'll say, you know, what's a piece of advice? Well, one of the pieces of advice I always give them is if you can get on a team, I don't care what team, I don't care if it's negotiations, I don't care if it's HRT, CERT, whatever. If you can get on a team, because not only the camaraderie, but now you have a group of people that hold you accountable, right?
Exactly.
You have access to training that you won't have. So you're going to be one of the more trained officers when stuff hits, and equipment possibly even. Tell me about some of that. I mean, do you look at that the same for rookies when they're coming in? How?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, we always looked at, especially when I started getting up toward the command level, making decisions or helping the commander make a decision before I was a commander. You know, we went for tryouts. We weren't necessarily looking for the fastest, biggest, strongest people. You know, we were looking for someone that was a consummate professional,
right,
that had zero arrogance and wanted to do the job for all the right reasons, you know. And so
right,
we were looking at people, and what we would tell them is this: hey, listen, you get on a specialized team, there could come a day in your career, it might or it might not, but there could come a day in your career where the only hope that your fellow correctional officers ever have of coming home is going to be you.
Sure.
And I said, that's a big commitment that you're making. That's a big
Sure.
commitment. So, yeah, I would say, and I agree with you, whether it's a CERT team, a cell extraction team, riot control team, a negotiator, get on a team if you know, if you're so inclined and you want to, you know, do something extra, you know, do something beyond just going in for 8 hours and going home. If that's your and it's not for everyone, but if you know, I would encourage people that if that's your personality, then seek those people out, ask them questions,
Sure.
See what they think about being on those teams, you know.
Yeah. And some of them are, I know the Bureau of Prisons has a crisis support team, which is people who just walk around and, you know, talk after we have an incident or something. You got negotiation teams. So I think you could find a spot somewhere if you look hard enough. Yeah. So I know at one point you made a team leader. So tell me about what it's like being a team leader. What was your leadership style at that point in your career?
My leadership style was to put good people in charge of each squad that I could trust, and they knew we had an annual training plan. They could look at it. They knew that when our training was coming up, what we're going to be training on. They would let me know, hey, we're going to be teaching this class. Rob Sharkey's going to teach this part of it. Phil Jensen's going to teach this part of it. And I'd let them do their job, because I wouldn't have picked them for that job if I didn't trust them. You know, and they always reported back to me on how training, and I would go around and watch all the trainings, of course, by then. And I would still run, jump, and shoot with them and all that good stuff. Because I made a commitment that no matter where I went, if I couldn't do the qualifications, the minimum qualifications with guys I was asking to do it, then I was going to step down immediately. So,
sure.
And all the teams were that way. But one of the biggest parts is when you become, you know, and that position is the liaison to the chief deputy warden and the warden. And you know, and I told my guys, I don't care what they ask us to do, we're going to do it. And we're going to be professional about it. I don't care if they need us to go put sandbags to keep water from coming into prison, whatever the mission is. And I told them, you know, I don't want you to get in with any of your line supervisors or any of that. If any of that happens, and you come talk to me,
Sure.
I'm the person that will go talk to them, and you know, and we'll work it out. So, and you know, so I was a good buffer for them, and that, you know, that was, I felt part of my responsibility was being a buffer for them.
Absolutely.
When it came to administration,
take that off their shoulders and let them do their job.
Let them do their job. Yep.
Yeah. Another thing you mentioned just a second ago was you used to go around and watch the training. And I was teaching a class last week. I teach for command presence, and I teach leading when it hits the fan, which is for first line supervisors, decisions that you make. And one of the discussions we got into was know your team's capabilities. How often do you go out and watch what they can do? Because just like that governor, when he came back and he said, do you have people in place that can do that? Well, thank God that the director gave him an honest answer. No,
Right.
I don't. There's a lot of administrators out there that think I've got a CERT team, so I can put them in whatever instance there is. And that's just not true. It takes training. It takes commitment. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, we were part-time. I remember my commander telling me, Adam, the easiest thing that you will ever do for this job is to stay in elite physical condition. He said it makes all the other stuff that's harder a little bit easier when you're doing it. So, and I took that to heart. And we would have to do a lot of that on our own time. We weren't getting paid for it, going out for a run after work or run before work, hitting the weight room, on our own time. And I would tell people that do have spouses out there that if you're going to decide to go down that road, you need to sit down and have an honest conversation with them.
Yeah.
I want to do this, but there's going to be some times where I'm going to have to be out going to the gym. I'm going to have to go for a run. And there's going to be some times at the most inconvenient time it could ever be where my pager, I had pagers back then, or my cell phone later on is going to go off. And no matter what I'm doing, I have to respond. Sure. And that's the conversation I really challenge young correctional staff if they're going to get on a specialized team. Just have that conversation with your spouse. It can save a lot of miscommunication and heartache later on.
Yeah.
Need their support.
I had a great wife who put up with a lot. When I was on the K-9 unit, we'd get called out in an escape. She wouldn't know where I was for 2, maybe 3 days. I'm in the woods. There's no phones. We didn't have a phone everywhere back then, so she'd just sit home and worry or watch the news. So, no, that's absolutely right. Have a talk with them because they're going to be invested in your time on the team.
Yes, they are.
Wow.
And you need their support to do it. You need their support.
Yeah. So tell me, as a team leader, what was one of the toughest decisions that you had to make during that time? Anything stand out?
I didn't have to make too many tough decisions. One of the toughest things was if we were running a tryout, and there was a lot of good people. They gave everything they had at the tryout, but it just they weren't going to be capable of doing what needed to be done. Some of them were friends of mine, that I worked with on the line with, and that was always tough. And there was a couple of times where, one time in particular, where at the time this decision was made, I was the assistant, and I had a great commander, and me and him kind of had to make a decision about telling someone that they couldn't be on the team no more, and that was tough.
Sure.
But me and him, we had a long talk about it, and he said, "This is hard for me, Adam. What do you think?" I said, "Well, I mean, it is hard, but I said, we just got to look at the team as a whole, not the individual. We got to make this decision for the team." And there was other team members at the time didn't quite understand that, but they came around later on when all the facts came out about it.
Right.
Other than that, the hardest decisions I made was later on. When I started running, had oversight to running the schools. I had to make some pretty tough decisions then. Yeah.
Now, which job was that? Is that the emergency operations unit?
So I started going down. We would run 4 to 6 schools a year, a basic SWAT, which was 9 days, and then an advanced hostage rescue school, which was another 9 days, generally about 6 months apart. But throughout the year, we would run maybe a sniper school. We'd get input from the team, say, what school do we need the most right now for attrition? Might be a tactical firearms instructor school. It might be an entry operations instructor school for instructors. So on a good year, we'd run 4 to 6 courses a year. And I was very fortunate. A really good team member of mine he ended up getting the job to oversee the teams.
Mm-hmm.
And he immediately asked me to start coming down as an instructor. And that was a big commitment because he wanted me at all the schools. And, they're each 9 days. We get down there a couple days early, make sure the base is all set up for us. So that's a lot of time away from home. But it was something, I'd already been fortunate enough to help, and I was teaching at the team level, had been through just about all the schools at that point. But I really fell in love with teaching new operators. So when he asked me if I'd be willing to come down, I was pretty over the top excited about coming down. But it was for all the right reasons. It wasn't about me. I wanted to help. We had a really good thing going. I wanted to keep it going.
Yeah, absolutely. A little bit of legacy there.
Yeah. A lot of good people came before us, so we felt like we owed it to them. All the people that fought all the fights to keep the team. They at one time before I got on the teams, there was a big movement pretty high up in the department to get rid of the teams. Mm-hmm. They thought it was a waste of money and resources, and a lot of good people that were in charge of the program fought a good fight and were able to convince the decision makers, hey, you need us. You're going to need us. So,
I think for those listening, I think every agency goes through that at one time or another. You get really good teams, you're doing your job, things are not happening. So they decide, this is a place we can spend money. And then as soon as they start backing off on training, backing off on teams, well, things go to shit. And now we need them back. So, I think every agency goes through that.
I think so.
Let's talk a little bit about California. I had Ron on here in episode 37. He retired from San Quentin, but California is its own. Is it still the second largest system behind Texas?
As far as I know, it is. I know they've closed a couple prisons, but at one time when I was working, we always, I think, covered around 100,000 people incarcerated or something like that, if I remember right.
And I think that's about where you're at now. I always the thing I ran into a few years back when I was working for the BOP, the budget for California is $18.1 billion for CDCR. The Bureau of Prisons, the federal side of that, or side of corrections, is $8.1 billion. So it really talks to the amount of money that's poured into the CDCR out there.
Yes.
But you guys have gang problems. It started out there. I mean, that's the beginning of prison gangs was in the California prisons. So you deal with it, violence and stuff I think just at a different level. There's more of them out there. Tell me a little bit about what you saw there with the gangs.
I really got into gangs, and I was fortunate enough to end up being a sergeant running the gang investigations unit at the prison that I was at the time.
Okay.
So, I had, up until that point, I'd really educated myself. I was a yard officer, search and escort officer before I made sergeant. And I would go around having conversations with Sereños and, asking about where they grew up. What neighborhood is that? And so I actually made a binder, and it had all the little acronyms that they would tattoo on them that would, signify what part of LA or San Diego or San Gabriel Valley they were from. So I really got really knowledgeable in that, and it really helped me on the yard because I could talk to them, and if they're, say their shirts were off on a summer day, I could look at them and say, "Oh, hey, you're from La Puente, or you're from Bridgetown, you're from White Fence," and it was a way to open up a conversation. So they're like, "Wow, he does know where we're from," So I was fortunate enough to end up being the gang investigator for the prison. Actually, I think I might have misspoke. I wasn't a sergeant, but you had two sergeants in the I guess you would call the institutional investigations unit.
Sure.
Investigated all things, and my one sergeant had asked me to come in and be the head gang investigator for the prison. And I really enjoyed that job. It wasn't a level I wasn't at a maximum security prison at the time. We had a level 1, a level 2, and then a level 3 yard. And most of the stuff went down on the level 2 yard. Because there was so many of them. It was an open dorm setting, 1,100 people out
Yeah.
on the yard, and that's where all the big incidents went down, was on that yard. But California is very unique, because we have gangs that basically started back in the 60s, I
Yeah.
guess around the 60s, and I heard your podcast. I think it was Ron. Was it Ron from San Quentin?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he
Yep.
basically gave a good history of that and why they started. A lot of them mostly started as protection groups, and
Hmm.
it just kind of morphed after that. And the thing that really helped us with the prison gangs was when they
Hmm.
started opening the shoe units up. But since
Right.
I've retired, they pretty much emptied the shoe units out.
Yeah.
So a
There's a
lot
big
of those
fighting.
guys are out walking around now. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to help a lot of people that don't know what they're doing in politics, who've decided
Hmm.
restrictive housing is mean because they
Right.
don't understand what it does. But you bring up a great point, and I want to back up to this because you talked about how you walked out on the yard and you talked to these guys. And when I go inside these days and look around, and in investigations especially, I see a lot of people who are counting on reading letters and listening to the phone, and
Hmm.
they're watching the cameras. Cameras are the big thing. I can see everything and I know everything if I watch the cameras. And I'm going to argue that you don't.
No.
We were
No.
taught to get out there and talk to them, to watch them, to be part of that yard.
Hmm.
That yard should not be left alone.
Right.
You get the information by those inmates know you, and you get to know them. So, talk to me more about that. I love that you brought that up.
Well, I made a point, before I got into the gang unit when I was working out on the yards was, hey, I want to, and I don't like using the name shot caller.
Hmm,
I like to think of more as, the OG people.
sure.
They
Influence.
do they have the ability to make calls? Sure.
Yeah.
But I got to know who was running everything,
Hmm.
right? And so, a perfect example is, say if a Norteño disrespected one of the correctional officers, and it was a correctional officer I knew that wasn't blowing it out of proportion or anything like
Sure.
that. Instead of going and finding that young guy and maybe getting in a confrontation with him, I would go talk to. I don't want to say his name because he's out now and he's doing really good, I've
Yeah.
heard. But anyway, I'll just say his name was Speedy. Um, a long, long time Norteño. When he would come out, dressed to the nines,
Hmm.
shoes polished, everything pressed.
Yep.
Um, and he really carried himself very, very respectful. Um, and me and him had a good rapport. And I remember him telling me, "Hey, listen, you've always been so respectful to me and our guys." He said, "If you ever have a problem with any of my people, before he has to get locked up or something, if you come talk to me, um, just give me a chance. And if you still got to
Right.
lock him up, I understand that." So, um, this particular a youngster, 21 years old, and he really said a really derogatory thing to a female correctional officer, and she was very, very upset about it. She came to me right away because she knows I'd been at the time. I think I'd been working that yard as either a search and escort or a yacht officer for probably 12 years, so I
Right.
really knew everyone on the yard. Um, so I went down and talked to this guy, and I said, "Hey, this is what happened. I believe her. Um, uh, here's what I would like to see. I would like to see him um, apologize to her.
Sure.
Um, if he can't do that, then we'll have to go down a different road. But I know he's young. He just
Mm.
got here. Can you talk to him?" He said, "I'll talk to him." Half hour later, met us in the sergeant's office, and this kid had been crying. I don't know what he did to him, but um, and he said, "Hey, I'm sorry. That's not how the Norteños on this yard conduct ourselves. I'm trying
Right.
to get used to prison life, and I'm just having a bad day." And, because you don't know what's affecting them on that day. Maybe they got a bad
You
call
don't.
from their mom, a bad call from their girlfriend. You don't know.
Sure.
And I could tell he was sincere. He was truly sincere about it. So, I think the communication aspect and showing them respect. And I used to tell them all, "Listen, you'll have nothing but 100% respect for me until you don't give it to me. And then
Right.
we're going to go down an entirely different road." But I'm sure you saw this. The one thing that really bothered me about some people in corrections. They thought the badge was 6 foot tall and they could just go around being a bully, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Now, you didn't see a lot of that on the level 4 maximum security yards because you just wouldn't get away with it.
Yeah, they get weeded
But
out pretty quick.
on some of the lower yards, and we have to tell everybody, hey, listen, yeah, these guys are on a level 2 yard trying to get a level 1 yard so they can go be a firefighter. But if
Mm-hmm.
you look at their history, they've worked their way down from maximum security yards. So they've been on those heavy yards,
Sure.
Um, and even if an old Sereno hadn't been recognized by us as being part of the Mexican mafia, I guarantee you he had cousins, and I guarantee you he had people from his neighborhood that were part of his little clique, and they all know each other. They all
Sure.
know each other,
Yeah.
So the respect thing and the way you carry yourself, and I just found out the more I talked to them, interested in how their lives were when they weren't locked up, would ask
Mm-hmm.
them how things are going on the yard. How's it going? Is there any issues? Is anything bothering you? And I was sincere about that because there would be 11 of us on the yard and they'd be letting out 1,100 inmates,
Yeah.
right? So
Yep.
you had to have that communication skill, um, and they knew where I stood and
Mm-hmm.
I knew where they stood. But at the same time, that does not mean that you cannot show compassion for people. As long as they know this is not weakness, this is just me asking how you are,
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
You know, you'll see corrections people and they talk about it and they'll sit through the class, when they're learning leadership. And the number one thing that you need as a leader is influence. And to me, that's some of what communication,
Sure.
absolutely. But you were going to the yard to find the person that had influence with other inmates. You were
Absolutely.
staying involved with them so that you could have influence. And you're absolutely right. Too many people think that you wait till the situation happens. Well, if you haven't developed a discourse or influence with that inmate before that moment, you're not going to get it while they're blowed up and
Right.
hitting on the door or whatever. So
Yeah.
I think we
You
need to get
know,
away from being so worried about some of those words. Influence is a good word.
mhm.
If you're leading inmates, you have to have influence with them.
Yeah, they're not going to listen to you. And
Yeah,
then we're going to have chaos. It's just real quick. One of the, you
sure.
talked about communication with and knowing the influence and them having enough respect for you to come with a problem to you, knowing that you're not going to blow the problem out of proportion. You're going to deal with it respectfully, the right way.
Yeah.
There's a guy, I'll call him CJ. He was from the Bay Area, a 415 gang member. Big guy. He had salt and pepper braided hair, so he was definitely an OG, but still in tremendous shape. And me and him had great respect for each other, and we had a really good rapport.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget the yard had only been opened up after dinner for maybe a half hour, and he came down to the sergeant's office and he told the sergeant, "Hey, I need to talk to Dennis." And the sergeant knew him, so he knew it was serious. So I went outside and I said, "What's up?" Well, him and Speedy both
Mm-hmm.
wanted to talk to me. And I said, "Hey, what's up, guys?" They lived in the same dorm. So the dorms were 36 beds,
Right.
and they're secured by 2 steel doors on each end, concrete walls. And they said, "Hey, man, that guy they moved in the dorm." And I said, I didn't look at the movement after dinner. Well, when he came in the dorm, he basically he's a white guy,
Mm-hmm.
skinhead from, I want to say San Bernardino, California.
Yeah.
And he basically told him, "I'm not going to be living with no ends and no farmers," and kind of a derogatory term to the Norteños. Well,
Sure.
CJ and 2 of his guys had this guy in the bathroom with a shank. They were going to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
And CJ said,
Yep.
"Stop. Everybody stop what you're doing. Let's get Dennis involved. He'll get this guy out of this dorm."
Right.
And even the youngsters are like, "Are you sure?" And he goes, "If I ask him to, yes, I'm going to tell him exactly what's going on." Because he
Mm-hmm.
knew. And so here I told him, "Okay, I'm going to move him. All right.
Yep.
I'll put him back down in a dorm with Serenos instead of Norteños. But here's what you're going to do for me." He said, "What I'm going to do for you?" I said, "As soon as I lock the front door after he leaves, I
Mm-hmm.
want that weapon to come out the window of the back door out on the tier. Are we
Yeah.
understood?" And he said, "Absolutely understood, Adam." I said, "Okay. You were
Yeah.
honest with me. We'll call it even at that point. I can get a weapon off the yard, and no one's
Yep.
gonna die." And it was all because they knew me. They knew that I wasn't gonna be like charging in there, tearing up the dorm. You
Yep.
know, Yeah.
If you had never talked to them before that moment, you had no way to talk to them at that moment.
Yeah, they wouldn't
So,
have came to talk
yeah,
to me. Who
yeah,
knows what would happen that night. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. We need more of
that's
that these days.
kind of unfortunate. It's one of my fondest memories because I thought, I did a lot of hard work, building that respect and rapport with those influencers, and to have them
Absolutely.
come to me with a major issue, and I was going to handle it the right way. And I did it the right way. I let the sergeant know what was going on and told him here was my plan. What do you think? He goes, that's perfect, Adam. Just,
Sure.
if you can make that happen, that would be great. Yeah.
I think a lot of people that don't know corrections, not those that work in it, but the people on the outside, they don't understand most of those inmates, except for the violent ones, and we've usually got them at really high institutions. Most of those inmates want to do their time quietly.
Oh yeah.
They want to do it, and they want to
Absolutely.
go out. They want to get their rec. They want to get their education. And when people like that show up, if they did have to stab him or something like that, it'd shut down the whole institution. Nobody
Oh
done
yeah.
anything for a day.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah, I think that's one of the misconceptions out there.
Yeah, and that for the most part, the Hispanics control most of the drug trafficking in California prisons, and they're the last ones that want to see something go down, especially on
Sure.
the lower level yards, because if they get locked down, there's no one coming in to visit, and
Yeah.
it just stops the whole flow of money and everything.
Yeah.
And
It's like a
you know
small
that
business.
you've worked in prison, but most people are like, what? I said, yeah, that's why
Yeah.
they want
It's like a
peace for
small
that one.
business in the pandemic.
Yes. Oh,
So, how many years did you stay with California?
28 years.
28 years. Wow.
Yeah, my last 10, I was 18 years, I was on the inside. And then I was very fortunate enough, I've been going down as an instructor. And my good buddy Doug promoted to the SSU unit, which is another law enforcement arm in corrections, all special agents. And his sergeant had promoted to lieutenant, Chris. And Chris said, hey, I want you to interview for the job. I'd really like you to start. And then that was another thing I really had to think about because that was going to be a huge commitment. I had to move down to
Right.
Sacramento. That's where the office was at. Going to be gone a lot. And I thought long and hard about it. But I made a decision. Like anything else, once I made it, I was going to be committed to it.
Sure. And this is the task
And
force, right? The Department of
no,
Justice
this was
task.
so the emergency operations unit.
Okay.
They oversee um, several things. They oversee all the guns and bullets in the prison.
Sure.
But me, when I promoted as a sergeant with Chris, and then when Chris left, I promoted to lieutenant, and Tim came with me. Our job was we had oversight over the training, assessment, and certification of
Okay.
the members that were coming down to our schools to be certified members.
Right.
So along with that, I got up there, and a lot of the guys, like the SSU guys, the fugitive apprehension people, almost all of them had come out of corrections, doing all the street stuff. We started going out and helping one of the DOJ funded narcotics task force teams.
Okay.
Later on, they're called Triton now. They were a different name now, but I don't want to put that name out because there's some stuff that went down anyway.
That's fine.
So whenever, like any task force, they had like a core of dudes that's all they did, task force members. But then when we would start working a case, say a hit was coming up or a warrant here or whatever, we'd have to go down and take down a marijuana grow.
Sure.
So we'd get involved if they needed some of the team guys to enhance our numbers. It would go through me and my captain. Yeah, how many do you need? What can we do to assist? Whatever, whatever it is. So wore a lot of hats the last 10 years.
Yeah.
But it was fun. It was a good time. Yeah.
Well, I think you're kind of like me. You haven't done a real good job of retiring because from what I hear, you're still teaching.
Yeah. I was, when I was doing all the team stuff, when we'd run our school, we were such a big organization, the biggest thing we fought was attrition. When you got 424 spots statewide, when we would run the basic SWAT school, we could have as many as 65 people going through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the one thing that we had to fight down there was attrition. And it was not only was I, running the schools, but, one thing I did was, I had a core of instructors that would come out
Mm,
of the prisons, a lot of them team commanders themselves or senior guys that would come down, as the instructors.
sure.
And, my job was, I'll make sure we got the base lined up. You guys come down and everyone knew who they were going to be, what they were going to be teaching. We would set up to where an instructor was going to be a squad leader because they were coming down to be operators. I don't want you to have to,
Hmm.
in no leadership or anything like that. You're coming down to learn to be an operator, regardless of what the mission is.
Smart.
So that was a big learning experience for me. Because as an instructor, I was in charge of this block of instruction or running this squad. But then when I got to the position of sergeant, and then even more so when I became the lieutenant, whatever happened down there, the buck stopped with me.
Hmm.
Um, but I had a good captain, I had a good chief, and they were good administrators, and they were like, "We don't care what happens, just make sure we hear it from you before we get blindsided."
Yeah. It's usually, yeah,
I
that's
might have got
usually
sidetracked from your last question, so if you need to ask it again,
no, it's
ask.
okay. It's usually a hard and fast rule. Make sure I know first.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
absolutely. No,
Yeah.
I was just moving into, I know you're still teaching.
Yes.
Tell me what you're doing now.
Well, and that's what I meant to say. And we would say we needed a certification for LSTD flashbangs, if you will, at the team level. I would be having like 40 guys, 50 guys that would be needed the certification.
Sure.
Um, and Sandy Walls, who was a training director at the time for Defense Technology Safariland,
Hmm.
he generally would come out and do the class for us. Him and another guy or another instructor. So we just became friends over the years, really
Mm.
good friends. We were, as you can imagine, we were a pretty big contract for them.
Oh yeah.
Not only buying 424 plus 120 field agents, so that's over 500, sets of plates and carriers every year and helmets. But in the adult side of it, that's 30,000 stat-proof vests every 5 years.
Yeah.
So now we were a big contract, and so Sandy would like to come out and see us and do the trainings. And just over the years, we got to be friends. And he just, before I retired, he said, "Hey, when are you going to retire?" And I said, "I don't know, maybe 3 years, 4 years. I haven't really thought about it, Sandy." And he said, "Where are you going to end up?" I said, "Not in California, someplace where the cost of living will, uh, as far as we do have a fabulous retirement system. So, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to be someplace where it was a little bit more quiet. And I want to get into other reasons. I'm sure you know why, but
Sure.
so we ended up in North Carolina and hadn't been here probably 6 months, and I started driving Marietta, my wife, crazy. Because I went to being, gone a lot, doing a lot of stuff, running a lot of schools. And that at the team level, the thing I miss the most is you talking about a brotherhood of people.
Sure.
I mean, that will be there for you no matter what's going on. So
Yeah.
I really miss that. And she said, "Well, Sandy told you to give him a call. Why don't you call him?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah." Well, the next day when I came down, she poured me a cup of coffee and she had a little sticky note on my coffee cup with Sandy's number. And she
Mm.
said, "You will call Sandy
Yeah.
today." So I called him with no expectations. I said, "Hey, listen, Sandy, yeah, I know we had the conversation several years ago. I'm retired now. I ended up in North Carolina. I just wondering if you still might be looking for some instructors." And life has a funny way of working out. He said, "Hey, I just had two long East Coast instructors that have taught for me for many, many years. They're going to finally really retire.
Right.
Um, I could really use someone. I know what kind of instructor you are. I could really use you." And I said, "Okay, well, let me go to a class and." You go to a class, but there might be a different format you teach for your people, right?
Yeah.
So I just
Absolutely.
wanted to make sure I was on the same format with them. Yeah, and so that's been, it was 5 years ago in March that I started teaching for defense technology. So,
Yeah.
and mostly ICP classes, so all the less lethal. OC, impact munitions, chemical
Yeah.
munitions, and flashbangs. So,
The
and I
fun
love it.
classes.
I get to see a lot of good people that are still willing to, put it on and go combat evil on a daily basis. And
Absolutely.
I have a unique perspective, because I spent 18 years inside and then I spent 10 years on the street. doing things with task force and warrants and whatnot. And I always tell everyone this, I really believe this in my heart of hearts that correctional staff are the most underappreciated law enforcement arm in the United States. They just
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
Nothing derogatory about the people that think that. I just think that, until you've been inside a prison, day in and day out and see how they conduct themselves, how they
Yeah.
handle themselves, be careful about saying that, because they're protecting us from some of the most dangerous people that we can't
Yeah.
let back into society,
Yeah.
So I have a
I'll
really
even
good perspective about that.
Yeah, I'll even expand that a little more because my horizon has been broadened since I did this podcast. That's worldwide.
Oh, very nice.
No matter where you're at, somebody somewhere sitting in a broken seg chair watching an inmate,
Yep.
yeah. And because we've interviewed UK, Australia, Canada,
Oh, very nice.
61 countries have listened to this podcast. So that blew me away. I didn't expect any of that, but I'm like you. I love going out there, and it was almost a need for me to get back into it, to go visit, and I get to do it every week or every couple of weeks. I go out and I meet law enforcement and corrections, and I get to talk to them and see how they're doing, and I'm never disappointed. I mean,
Right.
of course, in the job we're in, where you're going out and training people, you're already getting the best of the best most of the time.
Oh, yeah,
Because,
absolutely.
they've already vetted
And
them.
you're getting people that want to be instructors. They take pride in that.
Yeah.
So, I like it because, I will get correctional staff, sometimes from state agencies, sometimes from local jails, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
from really small jails.
Yep.
And then, I get a lot of SWAT officers in the class. So, I've gained a little bit of experience on both sides of the house, and, I'm able to pass that on, things that we did and learn, inside and outside. And, the correctional staff really appreciate that, having
Mm-hmm.
someone that has that background. The SWAT members that come in, they really appreciate it. When they say, "Wow, you guys are like prison based, but you're like, we're a SWAT team." I said, "Oh yeah, we went outside. We did warrants, and
Yeah.
so it's a unique perspective. And I love being around the men and women who are committed to the safety of our nation.
Yeah.
I absolutely love those people.
I think that's great words to end with there. So what are you working on next?
I'm going to down to Morrisville, North Carolina next week. I'm going to do a 4-day less lethal program for them, instructor program.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a busy year. Defense Technology is a great company. We train, I think last year the training director said we trained over 25,000 law enforcement officers, or something. It
Nice.
is a big number on a
Yeah.
variety of classes. From I do a CERT basic instructor course for corrections, along with the ICP classes. Those are the two main classes that I do for them.
Sure.
But we do red dot sight, search warrant, use of force, vehicles, just everything. So really good company, and more importantly, they make really good products. That especially on the correction side, really, really help them, to get some of these messes under control. And I've met a lot of great people, good company, great people.
I'm absolutely a fan of Safari Land and DefTech. DefTech
Yes.
and CTS we work with a lot in the Bureau of Prisons.
I got a really good friend, Husky rescue buddy of mine. He was one of my head instructors for many, many years. Saved my ass a couple of times when I was in charge of the schools. He worked for CTS on their side, so I know. I've met Phil and all the guys over there. Great company.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'll get with you after we get off here and find out what kind of contact information you want put in there. But I appreciate you coming on the podcast today. Great conversation, and it's a pleasure meeting you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great.
Yeah, maybe we'll do it again in the future.
Sure.
Till next time. This is Mike Cantrell with the Prison Officer Podcast. Hope you have a great day. I would like to take a minute to thank one of our sponsors that make the Prison Officer Podcast possible. Omni RTLS is a company that I've been working with for the last year. I am proud to be part of this team of correctional professionals who have developed the best real-time locating system on the market today. With Omni's real-time location technology, you automatically know the accurate locations and interactions of all inmates, staff, and assets anywhere in your correctional facility, and you have this information in real time. Omni is cutting-edge software for today's jails and prisons. It is the only way to monitor every square inch of your facility while still being PREA compliant. Go to www.omnirtls for more information and to make your facility safer today. That's www.omnirtls.com. If you enjoy these podcasts, the best way to support the Prisoner Officer Podcast is to share these episodes with your friends or family on social media. Let me invite you to visit www.theprisonofficer.com. If you haven't already, check out the Prison Officer Podcast on Facebook and click that little follow button. Or leave us a message, or better yet, leave us a review. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcast, Google, or Spotify, please click the subscribe button. Till next time, I'm Mike Cantrell. Watch your back, and please take care of each other out there behind those walls.